Okay, as you saw there, I was taking all my measurements for where I need that window, how big that window needs to be. And a couple things to take into factor is your overall size, but the window layback on that was right around 80 degrees. So when I was making my measurements, I used one of my squares to check that angle right there, and I found it was right around 80, 81 degrees. So I drew it all out. You can see my drawing here where I've got to have my bead roll from measuring off of the other side. So I know where my size is. I went ahead and I cut this one out. As you can see, I cut out of my sheet. I cut right off the end. I went over and kind of test fit it, and it worked really, really well. I saw that because where I have that lower bar welded that's going to give that roof cap the support, I need a little bit of angle. So I put just a slight angle on about 10-degree kick on that on the lower part of that door. So next up, I'm ready to lay out my back window. After I knew that that one fit just right off my measurements, I'm ready to cut my back one out and commit to the second one. So again, now that I've got this angle cut on it from the first one, because I lined it up in my sheet and I took that 80 degrees right off the end of it, I've already got my angle, so I'm pretty close on this measurement. Now I know that the back window upright, that B post, was a slight bit different, about 1 degree different than the front of it. So rather than having any issues there, I'm just going to make this a bit long and trim this end off of it just so that I know, and it's also got a little ding in it right there, so I'll know that I've got, you know, perfect corners, perfect edges on everything. So I'm going to time lapse that real quick, and then we'll start fitting those windows in. Now just clamping it on, we can see that we are pretty close on our alignment on that anchor, on that angle there. So this back one's gonna have to be cut off there. This side of the line looks pretty close, might be just a little bit wide at the bottom. May have to trim just a hair more off at the top. But now we can see that our window's got a pretty good shape. We're correct on our lengths, on our heights. So now we've got to trim off the back here, and the best way to do that, grab yourself an ink pen, just some cheesy old ink pen. Hold it up as tight as you can, and you can reach up from the inside and mark that so that you know exactly where your overlap is, how much room you have, and then when we lay out our bead roll, we can measure off of that mark. Now as we see, when we pull this off, we've got a scribe line, basically a nice little line all the way our panel, which tells us where the edge is at. So now we can trim, we can bead roll, we can prep this the rest of the way, and then after we get it welded in, we can cut that window out and build a Lexan window to fit in its place. Okay, now that we've got it trimmed out, we know that it's going to be about the perfect size. I'm ready to put this little kicker on it that goes down to that lower bar, so it'll have that same shape. We don't have to worry about it trying to pooch out down there. I'm going to go ahead and throw a quick bend in that, and we're ready to start lining out for our bead roll. We're going to do one more quick test fit before we bead roll it. We'll get it all kind of tacked on there together with clamps. May throw a couple of tack welds on it just to hold everything in place. We can cut those loose, pull it loose, do all of our bead rolling, and awesome. I've got the panels on now. We're ready to mark out where our bead roll is going to be for basically our little window bezel. On that side, I tried to leave the window as big as I can, so I basically broke my bezel, put my bead roll right at the base of where the roof was at, and right at the top of where this lower support bar is. I wanted this window, I didn't want to shorten this window any, so I'm going to try to use it just as big as it is. The only extra material we have here is where they overlap, so that I can weld them. Also, I put a couple of holes in here. I know they're not spaced out, but I'll go through and plug weld all of those when I'm done. Those will all be ground down, filled over, and you won't even know those are there. So it really wasn't a big deal not spacing my rivets out. The bottom bar also where the door is going to hang over it, it's going to overlap a slight amount, and it'll be riveted also. But these current holes, I'm going to weld those up. We'll grind those down, make them all smooth and flush. So I'm ready to go ahead and lay out my windows, and I'm going to put my tape basically 1/8 of an inch farther in than where I know that bar is, 3/16 of an inch farther in from where I know that bar is, just so that when I run my bead roller down that edge, I have a mark to go off of. You can go either inside or outside, but just so that I can show you guys for reference sake, I'm going to mark it all on the outside. I'll also go through and mark it with my Sharpie on the inside, so that when I'm bead rolling it, I can look at both sides and know right where I'm at. Here we have the right side with the bead roll in it that you can see. And over here we have the left side with the tape line, and we will bead roll on this outside edge of this tape line, and it will be identical to the other side. A couple things we're going to have to think about as we go along with this bead rolling is the depth of which this window is. We don't want it to go too deep to where the window lays in, but we don't want to go so shallow so the window still is raised. So we need to make sure we get our depth correct on that. And another thing is, after we get all this in and welded, I'm going to have to go back and cut a section of this so that it opens up. This type of body, with how vertical this side window is, it's really difficult for the driver to slide in at that angle. So I'm going to make the top where it opens up like a hatch so that the driver can get in and get out easier. Ultimately, you don't want to get caught in this car with a fire and not be able to exit the car, or be injured and have the safety crew struggle to get you out. That's when they cut the whole top off of it. We don't want that. So we will plan that out later on, but first off, I want to get all this welded in, bead rolled, and then welded in, get it all solid so that it doesn't move around. If we start to cut with stuff not welded up all the way, things are going to move and it's never going to align correctly. So this is our next step. I'm going to go ahead and yank these off, and we'll start bead rolling them. Here you can see the right side of the body is on the car. I built this side of the body a couple of months ago. I've had it off, I've had it back on. I put it on originally, I wanted to kind of see what the shape was going to be like, and happy with everything that's behind it. So we're ready to finish up the body. This was just some crappy material that I had laying around, and I just kind of used it to kind of mock it up. This is not the final pieces. The final pieces, the seams will line up. The seam will line up here at the center of that door post. Now the seams are kind of offset and they're kind of out of whack. I like having those seams, when you're building a custom body like this, having those seams perfect and where they should be. It just kind of looks more authentic. So this is just kind of to mock it up. The gaps on it are a little bit out of whack. Where my headers pop out of this side, they're a little oversized. So I'm going to get this basically done to where I like it. I'll make all my adjustments, all my marks, everything that I know that I want, and then when I take it off and I build my final piece, I can make those absolutely precision and be happy with the final outcome. Now we're ready to do this on that side and kind of get the overall look of the left side of the body. We will have a cutout for the wheel well. We will have to make some alterations as we go forward, but I ran out of this crappier beat up material, so I'm going to use my actual finish material on that side, so I'm hoping I can just do one and done and not screw it up. I've now got the windows installed. I've got them welded all the way in, and I went through and I ground all my tack welds. So we're ready to move forward with actually building the side panels. Here's a rough sketch of our design here. You can see where the left rear corner drops down behind the tire, so I'll figure that into all my measurements. And I've also got to remember to keep this angle as a factor, because I will have to take that into account if I cut it too short. If I cut it flat at a 90 degree with the bottom or the top of the panel, it'll have a goofy looking body line here, so I don't want that. But yeah, next step, finish up these measurements and start cutting material. It looks awfully primitive, but let's see how these measurements work out. Let's go ahead and rough cut our body pieces. As I'm laying out my lines, I went ahead and I measured out all my rivets so I know that they're spaced correctly, and I went ahead and I used my edge scribe to put a mark on it so that I know that when they are all spaced out, they're all on the same level plane as well. I've got the rear end blocked up so I know what height it's supposed to be at. Now my panel is actually laying against my hub, so it's going to be really easy for me to mark the center of my axle location, and from there I can plan for the diameter of my tire. We've now got the majority of the side mocked up. We still have to build the back corner piece. We still have to build the front cowl extension there around the front fender. But now you can see how I kind of went around going, I built the roof cap and then built the doors. I still got a bunch of supports to do along the bottom of the door frame. I've got a bunch of bead rolling to do, but this will conclude this video and at least give us something to work off of and something to look forward to in the next video. So if you learned something, subscribe. If you just like following what we got going on, subscribe. Share it so your friends can see it. And yeah, we'll be back next week with another video.